What's up, guys? Rob from the LTL Podcast here, bringing you another episode. This is going to be the kind of part 2 / conclusion of the trade deadline stuff that me and Steve were doing. But today I am here solo. I'm here all by myself. So I will be, just wrapping up the trades that we didn't really discuss last time. And obviously some of the trades that happened after that episode was recorded. So this episode is being recorded on 3/24 at around 7:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So take that for what it's worth. And so we'll just get into some of these more significant trades here. The first trade I want to talk about is Ricardo Raquel going to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Dominic Simone, Zach Aston Reese, Callie Klang, and a second-round pick. Pretty hefty return for Ricardo Raquel there. I mean, from what I understand, the idea here is that, or I should say, not from what I understand, but if I had to guess what's occurring here, the Pittsburgh Penguins probably saw the Panthers kind of loading up, the Rangers loading up, and said, all right, well, look, we gotta do something here, right? Because I think the general idea for the Pittsburgh Penguins is, as long as Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are in the lineup, as long as they still have those two guys, before they retire, essentially they're pretty much going to try and do their best to compete on a yearly basis. And you can't really fault them for wanting to do that. That being said, this is going to be a pretty long and painful rebuild. I mean, Callie Klang is a 2020 third-round draft pick for the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's a 6'2", 194-pound goaltender. So another prospect kind of out the door here for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And, no offense to Ricardo Raquel or anything of that nature, but it feels like a little bit much. I mean, Ricardo Raquel is 28 years old. This season, he's got 16 goals, 12 assists, 28 points, 53 games. I mean, he's not a bad middle six kind of forward. He's always been kind of a middle six production player. He can definitely get you a decent amount of points. I mean, he had 69 points in 2018. Last couple of seasons, he had 43 and 69, 42 and 65. A bit of a down year last year, 28 and 52, but Raquel's a 2-time 30-goal scorer. He certainly can hit those numbers again. I'm not doubting his ability to do so. I'm not saying that he can't do it again. But I don't know. I mean, when you take into account him having a couple of 30-goal seasons. Now, granted, those 30-goal seasons were 4 or 5 years ago at this point. So his production since then has kind of steadily dropped off. And so maybe the Pittsburgh Penguins are hoping here that they can get that middle six kind of 30-goal scorer again. I mean, it certainly helps with the depth on the wings, which is something that the Pittsburgh Penguins always kind of need. The depth up the middle has never really been the problem in Pittsburgh. But this is kind of a hefty return. I mean, Zach Aston Reese, I think, is a solid fourth-line player for them. Third or fourth line winger for the Pittsburgh Penguins. A little bit of grit going out the door. Callie Klang going out the door. And then a second with no protection on it going out the door. Granted, it's just your second. So it's probably going to be, more likely in the realm of a lower end second round pick, because the Pittsburgh Penguins look like they're on the way to the playoffs. But I don't know. It feels like a little bit much to me. I mean, Ricardo Raquel is also a UFA, so the Pittsburgh Penguins can try to, re-sign him on another deal. And he also is a 28-year-old player, right? So it's not like you're getting a rental here. The Pittsburgh Penguins are acquiring somebody that they can use in the long term. So maybe that's worth it to them. A decent prospect, and a really good fourth liner now, obviously Dominic Simone. So, maybe for the Anaheim Ducks, they probably figured that they're really not going to be able to go ahead and sign Ricardo Raquel this year. I'm not really sure what the... Oh, excuse me. What the standing of Raquel and negotiations were with the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks obviously outside the playoff picture at this point. They're 8 points out of the playoffs. They're within striking distance. But yeah. So Pittsburgh getting a middle six player that they can use for many, many years to come. Only 20 years old, and the Ducks are getting basically the second round pick, and the goalie prospect would have been enough in my mind, and they get a little bit more added value with Zach Aston-Reese and Dominic Simone. So up next, the Edmonton Oilers acquire Brett Kulak from the Montreal Canadiens for William Lagesson, a 2022 second round pick, which is conditional, and a 2024 seventh round pick. The conditions are if the Oilers reach the Stanley Cup final, Montreal will receive Edmonton's 2023 second round pick instead. We don't have to worry about that. Quite frankly, that's not happening for the Edmonton Oilers this year. Not to be that guy, but quite frankly, it's just not happening for them. I don't think anyone really expects it to happen for them, especially when you consider the fact that they completely struck out on any goaltenders that might have been in the market, or I don't even know if they struck out, because to say they struck out implies that they went to bat. I have no idea if the Edmonton Oilers even went to bat. I don't know if they showed up and put their helmet on and batting gloves on. So, but Brett Kulak, he's not a bad defenseman. I think Brett Kulak is okay. He's 28 years old. Last year of a 3-year contract. He's only making 1.85, which the Canadiens retained half of, so the Oilers got him on a deal. He brings a little bit of defense to the table, which is something that the Oilers desperately need. When you consider that Brett Kulak is only -10 on the Canadiens, that's actually pretty good. I mean, all things considered, for a guy who doesn't put up many points, he's only got 13 points in 56 games this year. So he's not always helping out his own plus minus. The fact that he's only a -10 on the Montreal Canadiens, who, if I pull up their goal differential here, currently sit at a -78 goal differential. Currently the worst goal differential in the entire National Hockey League. That's not that bad. I mean, -10 on that team, that's respectable. That's respectable, especially for defensemen who tend to be on the ice more than most other players. I mean, they don't have any plus players that aren't like guys that have played less than 20 games. Their best plus minus for any guy who's played a significant amount of time is Alexander Romanov, who's -3 in 60 games this year. So to be -10, you can certainly do worse than that. So, he's the kind of piece that the Oilers needed. Certainly the Oilers needed somebody that can help them keep the puck out of the net. Obviously, the primary goal to keep the puck out of the net would have probably been a goaltender. Unfortunately, they decided that was not in the cards. So they went with the defenseman instead. And Montreal, Kulak is young, sure, but he's starting to get to that age where he's going to want to compete. You're very clearly not in a position to do so. I think the Montreal Canadiens have more or less accepted at this point the unfortunate reality that that miracle run to the Stanley Cup Finals was just that. It was simply a miracle run. It was kind of the last hurrah of Shea Weber, and maybe not the last hurrah of Carey Price, but one of the last hurrahs of him we might ever see. So I think that they understand that at this point, which is good. They're willing to buy into the rebuild and do the things that they really do need to do in order to successfully navigate this next era of Montreal Canadiens, history. So I think this is a solid hockey trade for both teams. Canadiens get a second round pick out of, a decent defenseman. The Oilers were not done there. They went on to trade for forward Derrick Brassard from the Philadelphia Flyers for a fourth-round pick. Derrick Brassard, he's at this point in his career, I consider him probably a third liner at best. He had some okay seasons here and there. He can put you up 30 to 40 points ish. He's not the 60-point producer he was on the New York Rangers, but I think, given the right kind of team, he can net you a decent amount of points. Like, he put up 32 points with the Islanders in 66 games. Last year he playing for the Coyotes, playing for a terrible team. This year playing for the Flyers, he has 16 points in 31 games. He's a +6, which, again, on the Flyers is actually pretty good, being a +6 on the Philadelphia Flyers. And he's got 16 points in 31 games, which, on pace for roughly 40-ish points on the Philadelphia Flyers is pretty good. Now, do the Oilers necessarily need more scoring? No, but scoring wingers are something that the Oilers, surprisingly, kind of needed to address going into this playoff run. Because obviously, look, you've got McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and, those two guys up the middle are ridiculous. Or even if you just wanted to put one of them on the wing, and then you have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins on your second line as your center. But the wings are kind of a place of a little bit of concern. Zach Hyman's doing pretty well for himself right now. But then you look at like Yamamoto, who's got 30.62 games. Puljujarvi's only got 30 points in 50 games, which isn't bad. But if your second liners aren't going to be putting up, 60 points a season, you're going to need to supplement that with depth scoring. Evander Kane has played really, really well for them since he's got there. 14 goals in 25 games. He's playing pretty well, but again, when you're playing with the likes of Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, you can pretty much do anything and you'll put up points. It's really when you start to look at the depth, the third line, right? Like what Derrick Brassard was brought in to kind of address here, that you realize, okay, yeah, there was probably a need for this. Warren Fogle only has 22 points in 64 games. Derek Ryan, 17 points. Zach Kassian, 15 points. Boosting that third line, it would be huge. Because if your first two lines, if you're top six, right, you've got McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Nuge, Yamamoto or Puljujarvi, and Evander Kane, those are kind of top seven, we'll say. Those are solid players, but then when you get down to your third line and you got guys who are only putting up like 22 points, you need to supplement that with somebody who maybe can boost that and pick you up another extra 10 or 20 points down on that third line. You know what I'm saying? It sounds like nitpicky, but if your team is going to be going the direction that the Edmonton Oilers clearly are, which is all scoring all the time, considering that your GM can't seem to secure a goalie worth half of a penny to save his life, then yeah, those extra 10 to 20 points on your third line are going to make a big difference. And we're seeing that kind of play out for the Edmonton Oilers in the fact that right now they're kind of in a dogfight to even make the playoffs. I mean, yes, right now they are in their third divisional spot with 75 points, but Vegas has 72 points and is right behind them. And if they drop down out of their divisional spot, the Dallas Stars are only 2 points behind them for the second wildcard spot with 73, right? So and even the Vancouver Canucks are only 5 points behind them at 70 points, so they really need to do everything they possibly can to hold on to that wildcard spot, considering the fact that getting into the divisional spot, considering that whoever they play in that top spot, if they play Los Angeles, that's a lot better of a draw for them in terms of the first round of the playoffs than the Colorado Avalanche are, or the Calgary Flames are, or or even something like if Vegas ends up snagging a wildcard spot, and then you don't want to play Vegas in the first round if you can help it. You'd much rather play LA, right? So it's very, very important for Edmonton to stay ahead of the pack. Not that these other teams necessarily really went ham at trade deadline. The West was oddly very quiet when you compare that to the absolute chaos and mayhem that went on in the Eastern Conference. But all that to say, it wasn't that long ago that the Edmonton Oilers were outside of a playoff spot. Now, luckily for Edmonton, and unluckily for Vegas, at this point, Vegas's health is shot. I mean, they have so many injuries. The goaltending is a mess, and the cap space situation, which we'll get to, the cap space situation is also a complete disaster in Vegas. It's, the Edmonton Oilers stand a very good chance of holding on to that Pacific spot. But you got to do what you got to do, right? So I think this is a solid trade. I mean, a pretty good third liner for a fourth round pick on a 1-year deal. You'll take that. The Dallas Stars acquired Vladislav Namestnikov from the Detroit Red Wings. Vladislav Namestnikov, they retained half of his salary in Detroit. He's a 29-year-old. We know what Vlad's all about. He's another one of these third line guys that's gonna chip in and get you 20 to 30 points. And for a team whose scoring is as anemic, as the Dallas Stars, that's really important. 20 to 30 points on the Dallas Stars is a huge deal when you consider that they're, when you look at their fifth best goal scorer in terms of points, it's Jamie Benn, who's got 36. So, for your top liners, Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin, to be on pace for basically 40 to 50 points, it's a huge freaking deal to get another 20, 30 points under the belt. Like, Joe Pavelski's having a great season. Jason Robertson's having a great season. Roope Hintz having a great season. But it falls off pretty hard after that. Seguin, 37 points. Jimmy Benn, 36 points. And then Guryanov, 29 points, right? Radulov has 20 points in 56 games. So, the depth on this team is not necessarily bringing it in a way that they kind of need them to. And so all that to say, essentially, 30 points for the Dallas Stars is a really, really big deal. So, I won't go too at length on this because it's another one of these third liner trades that a team addresses a need. The Red Wings get a fourth round pick out of it. Solid trade for both teams. The Colorado Avalanche acquiring Andrew Cogliano, pretty much the same thing. Another one of these third, fourth line guys. Maybe Cogliano at this point is more of a fourth liner than anything else. At age of 34, he's a pure rental. He's probably not going to come back. Whereas a guy like Namestnikov or Brett Kulak, Derrick Brassard, Ricardo Raquel, these guys could possibly come back to these teams on another deal, but Andrew Cogliano, pretty much a pure rental here for the Colorado Avalanche, who, we didn't really talk about it last episode, but they did kind of address one of my main concerns with their back end, by going out and getting Josh Manson, and I think that this is actually a really, really important trade for the Colorado Avalanche when you consider, again, my biggest issue with their defense last year in the playoffs was that they were very undersized and getting bullied pretty hard. The Vegas Golden Knights pretty much abused the Colorado Avalanche in the playoffs last season, and the defense couldn't get the puck out. They couldn't get the puck out of their zone effectively because every time they were touching the puck, they were getting obliterated by these huge forwards on the Vegas Golden Knights. And that was a big concern of mine coming into this year because, you've got Eric and Jack Johnson who are pretty big boys, but, that's if they're even healthy a lot of the time. Jack Johnson has had a lot of injury concerns throughout the course of his career. He's stayed pretty healthy this year, so that's really, really good for them. But, adding a Josh Manson I think is important because Josh Manson is 6'3", 218. He adds a bit of size that this roster doesn't really have otherwise because Bowen Byram is 6'1", yeah, but he's 190. Sammy Girard is 5'10", 170. Cale Makar is 5'11", 187. Ryan Murray, 6'1", 206. Devontae, 6'1", 191. So, yeah, Eric Johnson, 6'4", 225. Jack Johnson, 6'1", 227. Curtis McDermott, 6'5", 233. And now you add into that Josh Manson, 6'3", 218. It definitely balances out the defense a lot more. And, look, let's be honest. This team gets enough scoring from up front that they don't really need to rely on their defense for scoring. The defense certainly does score, but I'm saying they didn't need to go out and add a offensive defenseman. They didn't need to do what the Toronto Maple Leafs did, which is just completely load up on offense. Adding Josh Manson is really, really big and should help them add a little bit of balance to the lineup between your scoring and your defense. And then obviously, Andrew Cogliano, he's going to help round out the bottom half of your lineup a little bit better than you had currently, because this team is slightly top heavy. I think they have decent depth, but adding some depth down the lineup always helps. So, solid. Again, another one of these just good hockey trades. Nothing wrong with that. Bit of an interesting trade here. Victor Rask goes to the Seattle Kraken for future considerations and come back to the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild retained half of Victor Rask's salary. So I guess this kind of a salary cap dump, considering I think Victor Rask has been playing in the minors most of this year. Those future considerations are probably going to turn out to be like a 7th round pick or something along those lines. This to me reads as very much a salary cap dump for the Minnesota Wild. So they have another really, really big trade, of course, involving the Florida Panthers. So this was a 3-way trade. So the Columbus Blue Jackets traded Max Domi and a 6th to the Florida Panthers, who then traded Max Domi to the Carolina Hurricanes, along with Tyler Inamoto for Yegor Koshkov, and the Columbus Blue Jackets got from the Carolina Hurricanes Aiden Hreshik. So basically, the TLDR is the Carolina Hurricanes acquired Max Domi. There was some salary cap gymnastics, shall we say. The Florida Panthers got paid basically a 6th round pick and a prospect in order to retain half of Max Domi's salary originally. So they're paying $2.6 million of Max Domi's salary, which is only on 1 more year contract, and ultimately then trade him to the Carolina Hurricanes. And again, this to me kind of reads as the Hurricanes saying, well, you know what? Quite honestly, we're in a really, really good spot this year. We're playing really, really good hockey. There really isn't that much on this team, if anything, that kind of needs to be addressed in any way, shape, or form. The forwards, or the goaltending has been nothing short of phenomenal, with Freddie Anderson proving everyone in Toronto completely wrong, sitting pretty with a 206 and a 928 save percentage, which, I mean, those are like Vezina caliber numbers. The defense is solid with Ethan Bear, Ian Cole, Tony DeAngelo, Brett Pesce, Brady Shea, Jacob Slavin, and Brendan Smith. Good mix of offensive defensemen with some size on the back end for the defensive defensemen and some bite. The centers obviously got Sebastian Aho, Kotkaniemi, Jordan Stahl, even down to Vinny Trocheck and Derek Stepan. I mean, it's a really, really good team. And so I think they're kind of thinking, all right, well, we could maybe use a little bit of snarl, a little bit of bite down our lineup, if possible. Players like that are always, always, always important for the playoffs. So you add somebody like Max Domi, who, not having the greatest season, sure. 32 points in 53 games isn't terrible. +2 on a pretty mediocre Blue Jackets team. 37 PIMs coming into this game. So definitely somebody who adds bite and who adds snarl. And guys like that are the kind of guys that you need, come playoff time. You need that middle six. Max Domi can play anywhere on your second or third line. He's 27, so you can sign him again for next season because, like I said, he's on an expiring deal. He brings those playoff X factors, something that maybe the Carolina Hurricanes felt burned them in the playoffs last year, coming up short of another, coming up short again on your expectations from last year. This team had very high expectations going into the playoffs, and they definitely underachieved kind of where they wanted to go. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a fantastic trade. They kind of almost basically really get him for free. I mean, they paid a 6th round pick. Or they didn't even pay a 6th round pick. They paid Yegor Korshkov and Aiden Reshchik, who I've not heard of these guys before. A 2nd round pick from 2016 and a 3rd round pick from last year. Okay. I think this is a fantastic trade for Carolina Hurricanes because, they can sign him again for the foreseeable future. They can keep using him. It's a good trade. I think this is a steal for the Carolina Hurricanes, quite frankly. You could re-sign him on a low contract considering he's had a bit of an off year, and then bada bing, bada boom, you've got your version of that playoff guy, right? Kind of the bite, the edge, kind of that guy that's going to make sure people stay in line, don't get out of line. Otherwise, he's going to have something to say. So, yeah, great trade here for the Carolina Hurricanes. And the final trade, which we will go over, is a trade that did not happen. Let me pull up the details here. So this was a bit of an odd one. Very, very odd situation. So Evgeny Dadonov and a conditional 2nd round pick was supposed to go to the Ducks for John Moore and Ryan Kessler. What was it? It was Dadonov and a conditional 2nd round pick. Yeah, for John Moore and Ryan Kessler. And what happened is Evgeny Dadonov has a no trade clause. And as it turns out, the Ducks are on his list of no trade teams. Dadonov has an MNTC, modified no trade clause. So he submits a list of 10 teams and says, you cannot trade me to these teams. All right, fair enough. apparently what happened is the list wasn't registered with the NHL, and I'm not really sure who the blame for that lies in. I'm not sure if that's an agent thing, if his agent is supposed to submit it to the team, and then maybe the team messed up, and the team didn't submit it. It's very weird. It's very, very bizarre. Something happened. There was some disconnect somewhere along the line where Dadonoff's no trade clause was not officially with the NHL, right? And so there was rumors that this trade was going to go through because it was never officially submitted. Therefore, the teams weren't beholden to it. That didn't end up happening because the NHLPA got involved and disputed the trade, as they should. I'm very glad that they did, just because, this is one of the moves that I think I can finally agree with the NHLPA on, because, yes, this is defending your player that he was traded to a team that he has a no-trade clause against. And so... yeah, the trade was basically nullified. And so it gets kind of awkward because Evgeny Dadonov is still a Vegas Golden Knight. And now it's like, what the hell do we do? Because here's the issue, right? So Evgeny Dadonov has $5 million on his deal for this year and next year. This deal was proposed in order to alleviate some of these salary cap problems that the Vegas Golden Knights have. Because this Jack Eichel trade put them in a situation, kind of a checkmate, where they can now not afford to bring Mark Stone, Alec Martinez off of LTIR. And now it's like, now what the hell do we do? It's worth noting that you can actually trade players past the trade deadline. It sounds kind of weird, right? There's a stipulation that those players, I don't know specifically, because I was fed different rules, but there is a stipulation that they're either not eligible for the rest of the regular season and playoffs, or they're only ineligible for playoffs. I don't remember exactly which one it is, but they're ineligible for playoffs. Certainly, you can't use that player in the playoffs, and they might be ineligible for the rest of the regular season. So the Vegas Golden Knights could still trade away Evgeny Dadonov to a team that is not on his no-trade clause list. That team would just have to be basically okay with eating $5 million in dead cap. Because, yeah, I don't know if he's ineligible for just this regular season and playoffs, but I'm assuming any team that would be willing to take Evgeny Dadonov on at this point would be a non-playoff team. So I don't really know if the whole being ineligible for the playoff things matters. Dadonov is having a pretty rough year, all things considered, with the Vegas Golden Knights. Only 27 points in 62 games, only 15 goals. And Vegas, they desperately need to get some salary cap relief. I mean, they bumbled it. They straight up, they bumbled their salary cap. And that's putting it lightly. They fumbled the bag really, really badly on this one. And so I don't know where they're planning on getting relief. I mean, here's the issue, right? Like, yeah, sure, you can just Tampa Bay Lightning yourself and, oh, they're healthy, but they're not healthy enough to come off LTIR yet. They're just going to have to skate for a month and a half. which the precedent has been set by the NHL that this is totally acceptable and in no way, shape, or form salary cap circumvention somehow. But yeah, it's weird. Like, I mean, again, they can make this trade, but they would have to pay. I mean, they don't have a first round pick for this year. They traded that away in the Jack Eichel trade. They do have a first round pick for next year. They still have their second. They still have a third from this year. They have picks with which to work, but are you willing to trade away a first round pick for the cap relief now? And then the other issue is, obviously, look, they're looking to move past this guy at this point. So the idea is that he'll be traded in the offseason, but now that teams kind of know how desperate you are to get rid of him, I'm sure the price is going to go up. $5 million in dead cap is no small number for teams to kind of eat, especially when you consider, it's not dead cap in a way that, like, he's not playing, but it's essentially dead cap in a way that's like, am I paying $5 million for a fourth liner or a third liner? I don't know. I think that he still has maybe something left to show us. I mean, for all we know, we could turn up next year and he could be a 20-goal scorer again and look fine. But it's kind of a tenuous situation. Like, I don't think his career is done. I think he's still got some gas left in the tank. I mean, he's 33. But how much gas at 33? Maybe a year or two of okay play. Maybe. I don't know. So Vegas is screwed. I don't know what they're going to do. They might just have to pull a Tampa Bay Lightning back. Oh, our players are so hurt. Oh, no. Shuckleberry Hound, Batman, and then see what happens. But this is the first time I can recall offhand, at least in the time that I've been watching hockey, that I saw a trade actually straight up denied by some inner workings of the National Hockey League at this point. The NHL has more or less stepped in and nullified the trade at behest of the PA. So, yeah, Vegas is definitely going to be in a tough spot. I mean, we'll see what they do in the offseason. We'll see what they do with this, current roster. I mean, they're not even in a playoff spot. And so the real issue actually is that, like, they need relief, or they need to get their best players on the ice now, because they're not even in a playoff spot at this point in time. I believe that they sit, a couple points back. They have 72 points, so they're 1 point back of the second wildcard spot, but the Stars have 4 games in hand. They're 3 points back of the Oilers, but the Oilers have 2 games in hand. So the teams ahead of them have games in hand and are already in a better spot than them. And then, like I said, right now, the Vegas Golden Knights are in a very, very rough position with Max Pacioretty, Robin Leonard, Riley Smith, Brady McNabb. All of these guys, Mark Stone, Alec Martinez, all of these guys on injured reserve. Jack Eichel dodged an injury the other day. Still has a wrist. His wrist is still ailing him, but he dodged long-term injury, thankfully. So, yeah. Vegas is in a rough spot. We'll see what they do. They could very well miss the playoffs this year, which would be incredible if they decide, or if they manage to do that. So, but yes, that's going to be our trade deadline wrap up here. Next week we'll be back with the 2-person podcast. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys again next time.